It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story, the greatest comfort and encouragement. King Charles thanks the public for the support and goodwill he's received since his cancer diagnosis. The Foreign Secretary calls for an immediate pause in the fighting in Gaza ahead of Israel's expected military offensive in Rafah. Sky News reveals how parents are turning to unregulated education because schools won't take their children.
The education system as it is now is archaic, and I believe it is failing children with autism.
Also tonight, police searched the Thames for the man suspected of carrying out the chemical assault in South London. Parkrun denies that wiping its speed records from its website was because of a row over transgender runners. Plus, the armour-plated turtle that can bite through bone that's turned up in a lake in Cumbria. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in the press preview from 10:30. Hello there, a very good evening. We start tonight with some breaking news, and the King has just released a statement thanking the public for the support he's received since his cancer diagnosis on Monday. King Charles said the kind thoughts of the public had been the greatest comfort and encouragement. On Thursday, Queen Camilla said Charles was doing extremely well under the circumstances following the start of his treatment. Well, in his statement tonight, the King said, "I would like to express my most heartfelt thanks for the many messages of support and good wishes I have received in recent days. As all those who have been affected by cancer will know, such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. It is equally heartening to hear how sharing my own diagnosis has helped promote public understanding and shine a light on the work of all those organisations which support cancer patients and their families across the UK and wider world. My lifelong admiration for their tireless care and dedication is all the greater as a result of my own personal experience." Our correspondent Amelia Harper is at Buckingham Palace for us tonight. Amelia.
Well, Jonathan, this is the first statement from the palace that we have had since that initial revelation about the King's cancer diagnosis, and he very much is thanking the public for their support tonight. On Monday, Buckingham Palace revealed that he had received this diagnosis of a form of cancer, what exactly we don't know, and that this was found during treatment for an enlarged prostate. He started treatment on the Monday for that cancer and then flew back to Sandringham on the Tuesday, and it's not clear at what point he'll be returning back to London. And I think with regards to that statement there from the palace, it perhaps reveals two things. Firstly, I think the palace is trying to inject perhaps a little bit of positivity surrounding the narrative of this cancer diagnosis. And secondly, I think the palace is trying to reassure members of the public that the King is able to maintain his constitutional duties, the things that he does behind the scenes, because during his treatment, he has stepped back from his public-facing roles. The Buckingham Palace has said it won't maintain any running narrative about his health, but I think what's interesting to note tonight is perhaps the difference in communication with regards to the King's health versus what we know about the Princess of Wales's health. Catherine underwent planned abdominal surgery earlier this month and is recovering at home, but the communications with regards to how she is doing has been very scarce. So I think really overall tonight is very much the King trying to thank the public and the palace trying to reassure the public during what is an uncertain time.
Amelia, outside Buckingham Palace, thank you. The Foreign Secretary has tonight called for an immediate pause in the fighting in Gaza ahead of an expected Israeli ground offensive in the southern city of Rafah. Lord Cameron tweeted that he was concerned about the prospect of a military operation in Rafah, with more than half of Gaza's population sheltering there. Well, earlier, Germany warned that an IDF offensive in Rafah would cause a humanitarian catastrophe. Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed 44 Palestinians in Rafah today, just hours after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered troops to evacuate civilians ahead of an invasion. Sky's Diana Magnay reports now from Jerusalem, and a warning her report contains some distressing content from the start.
The injured keep pouring in. Small bodies, the very tiniest. The elderly on stretchers. And young men in the prime of their lives. This is in Deir al-Balah, in the centre of the Strip, after an Israeli airstrike killed 5 people. Their bodies brought to the hospital morgue wrapped in blankets. It is a pitiful sight. Each bundle one more addition to the already dreadful toll. 28,000 dead per the Gazan health authorities, and that number promises only to keep on rising. More strikes in Rafah too, right at the south of the Strip, up against Egypt, where Israel is planning its final operation in amongst the close on 1.5 million people who are seeking refuge here, forced south in a series of evacuations. It is the army, Israel says, which must come up with another evacuation plan before they move in on 4 Hamas battalions, which are supposedly holed up here. But the details are impossibly vague.
There are open spaces in Gaza. There are places where it is possible to set up tent encampments so that civilians can get out of harm's way and not allow Hamas to use them as human shields. And we very much hope that the UN agencies that have until now been resisting our attempts to help civilians get to safety, have instead been urging them to stay in Hamas strongholds, will make the right decision and will help us get civilians to safety.
A terrible tale emerging this Saturday of 6-year-old Hind Rajab, missing for 12 days since she made this desperate plea for help in a car on her own in Gaza City, surrounded by the bodies of her relatives who were shot before her eyes. These are the remains of the Red Crescent ambulance which was dispatched to find her, coordinated with Israeli forces and destroyed, apparently, by Israeli fire. The 2 Red Crescent aid workers inside killed, as was Hind herself. The IDF has told Sky News that they're looking into it.
The ground operation is looming, and they will do in Rafah like what they did in the north. There were massacres. More than 1,000 massacres took place, and the world was silent. They have given a green light to committing massacres and taking over Rafah.
He lost 6 family members in an overnight strike in Rafah, and he knows there is more to come. By now, everybody does. But what can they do except wait and beg the world to put the brakes on Israel and pray that they are spared its bombs? Diana Magnay, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Back here, a Sky News investigation has found that thousands of children with special educational needs are being forced out of the recognised education system, rejected by every school they apply to. Head teachers say the problem comes down to funding, but one parent told Sky News the system is archaic and failing those children who need more support. As Becky Johnson now reports.
Let's have a look what's in this shop.
Madeline is at home because she has no school place.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I'm going to have my soda.
She was rejected by every school her counsel approached because she has autism. Her anxiety means she needs a high level of support.
We believed that they contacted about 11 schools. They received all the replies back and they were negative. They could not meet Madeline's need.
As a last resort, she's joined a growing number of children whose parents are instead given money to pay for educational activities outside of school.
I believe that the education system as it is now is archaic, and I believe it is failing children with autism.
Forced out of the recognised school system, Madeline now comes here. It's a controversial form of education, known as unregistered alternative provision, which is increasingly the only option for children shut out of regular schooling. As long as they're small and part-time, places like this don't have to register with Ofsted. In fact, no one oversees them. This one was set up at a caravan park by 2 trained teachers who also have children with autism.
I get calls every day from a different family that they are in crisis, they don't know where to turn, and there's kind of no answer.
But the lack of oversight of places like this means no one knows how many there are around the country. Yet it's estimated at least 20,000 children attend them.
How do we know they're doing a good job? How do we know these children are being well looked after? These are very vulnerable children with special educational needs and disabilities. They might not be able to communicate. And we're trusting these children in these settings with these people that we don't know as much about as we should do, perhaps.
The obvious solution would be for schools to stop rejecting children, but head teachers say it isn't that simple.
There's some actually perverse incentives within the system. So if you're an inclusive school, it's more difficult to go and reach those very high results that some schools reach. We have to go and fund the first £6,000 in our school. When you take multiple children with additional needs, that adds up.
The Department for Education says councils are responsible for making sure there's appropriate education for all children and adds that it's increasing funding this year. But children like Madeline have been rejected by a school system that no longer provides for everyone. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Police have been searching the River Thames as they continue their hunt for a man suspected of carrying out a serious assault with a chemical substance in South London 10 days ago. Detectives say they believe Abdul Ezedi entered the water and may never be found. He's suspected of pouring a strong alkali on his former partner and also injuring her 2 young daughters in the attack in Clapham. Thomas Moore reports now from central London.
Police began their search for Abdul Ezedi's body at low tide, moving up the River Thames from Westminster towards Chelsea Bridge, where he was last seen. Officers from the Marine Policing Unit scoured exposed riverbanks and barges, anywhere that a body could wash up or become trapped. It is now a week and a half since Abdul Ezedi is believed to have jumped into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. This stretch of the river is tidal. It's also fast flowing with all the recent rain. It means the police will have to search a huge area for his body. The police have used CCTV to track Ezedi's movements in the hours after he doused a woman and her 2 daughters with a corrosive chemical in Clapham on January the 31st. The trail ends at Chelsea Bridge shortly before midnight, and the police say he is most probably dead. To narrow their search for his body, they will be guided by science. The river's flow, its eddies and bends that make a body more likely to be found on certain stretches. There's experience too. More than 20 corpses a year are recovered from the Thames.
There's also a lot of infrastructure in the river against which things get caught. And so what's likely to happen in this case is the body is likely to hit the water, the individual will die, possibly even from the impact, but certainly from drowning, and then will sink. The tide will move the body to and fro in that general area. And at some point, the body is likely to rise because of a natural decomposition.
Police could use sonar to scan the riverbed, but more likely the body will be spotted by someone walking or running on the embankment. But it could be days or weeks, and police warn it's possible the body is never found. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Chelsea, West London.
To Pakistan now, where jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan says he intends to try to form a government as counting continues in the country's general election. Mr Khan's rival, Nawaz Sharif, has also claimed victory in the polls. Sky's Cordelia Lynch has been speaking to Imran Khan's sister, Alima, and sent this report.
Alima Khan believes her brother has inspired a revolution from behind bars. Imran Khan's allies disrupting the status quo and winning the most seats in Pakistan's election.
How is your brother? What's his mindset right now?
He sent out a very clear instruction today that you have to go out, protest outside the returning officer's office and recover your seats, the ones that have been stolen. It wasn't Imran Khan's vote that they took away. They took away the right of 15 million people to recognize the symbol. That bat was a symbol that 15 million people who are illiterate recognize their candidate with the symbol.
Do you have faith that they will be able to reverse those results?
It's not his wish, it's the vote, the people's vote. The time has come that you have to respect the vote.
Do you think your brother owes it to his supporters to compromise and to work with the other sides?
I don't know, I can't speak for my brother right now, but I'll speak for myself. I would be so upset if you go and sit with people who were participants in the abuse, the human rights abuse, the women, the way they were abused, the homes that were broken into, the children that were threatened. I would never expect them to be supported.
Nawaz Sharif was the first to come out and claim victory, saying his party was the largest party and that Pakistan doesn't have the space for a fight. What's your response to that?
As a Pakistani, first tell him to give back all the seats he's stolen. He's got to return those.
Mr. Sharif denies stealing any votes, and the government insists the elections were fair. But in Karachi, there were protests over alleged ballot rigging. The next few days, though, could well be more about deals than discontent. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Lahore, Pakistan.
The community-running charity Parkrun is facing a backlash after removing speed records from its website. The decision not to publish details of Parkrun's fastest runners follows a row about allowing transgender women to take part in the female category. The former Olympic athlete Sharon Davis has spent 5 years calling for Parkrun to change its approach to categorising runners, but she told Sky News she's unhappy at times being completely wiped from the website. Sky's Matthew Thompson reports.
Parkrun is a global phenomenon enjoyed by millions around the world. But the organisation has recently run into trouble as it emerged that several of its women's records are held by transgender athletes. That prompted a furious debate, even if runners here in Clapham weren't overly concerned.
It's more of a hot topic when it comes to Olympics. When it comes to Parkrun, I know Parkrun's grown to a global event now, but I think people have got to remember as well that it is just a bit of a get-together, a bit of fun on a Saturday morning.
The debate about trans people in sports has been blown out of proportion, and I think make sports more inclusive. That's the conversation that we should be having.
I think everyone should just go there and have fun. It's Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Like, let's all just go and have some fun and race. And if people want to look at the stats, then they can. If they don't,
I think just anyone and everyone should be able to do it and have access to it.
But by deleting all of its course records from the website, the charity seemed to be trying to brush the problem under the carpet.
Parkrun insists that the changes it's made are not in response to the criticisms over sex categories, but to make it feel less like a race and to encourage greater participation. Now, that may or may not be true, but the timing of the change has meant that it's caught in the raging debate.
One that's unlikely to subside anytime soon.
For 5 years, we've been trying to lobby Parkrun just to have categories that are based on biological reality. I'm sorry, I don't believe that, this is something that they've had planned for months or years. I believe this is a reaction to the criticism that they've had recently about the competitiveness and the course records.
In a newspaper interview, Parkrun's CEO, Russ Jeffrey, said, "Sadly, there's just a lot of anger and emotion in this conversation. I think we would all benefit from just turning the heat down and remembering that in the end, Parkrun is a free, fun community event and a great way to start the weekend." The debate puts Parkrun in a difficult position. Its mission statement is literally to empower people to come together. But that is a tall order on an issue that has proven so divisive. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
The state funeral of Ireland's former Prime Minister John Bruton has taken place, with the President of Ireland and First Minister of Northern Ireland in attendance. The service in Dunboyne was followed by a burial service in Rusk Cemetery with full military honours from nearly 200 members of the Irish Defence Forces. Our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins reports.
A state funeral for an unsung hero of peace. John Bruton's contribution was quietly acknowledged by the President of Ireland. The Taoiseach offered his sympathies to the former Prime Minister's widow. Northern Ireland's First Minister and Deputy First Minister sat together. The restoration of power sharing, a timely tribute to a man who championed compromise.
He understood better than most how to work for compromise in the midst of political tensions. He was in no sense a bigot. In all his interactions with those who shared his outlook as well as with those who did not, he showed a capacity to stand in the other person's shoes.
Remember me. He left office before the Good Friday Agreement, but it was John Bruton and his British counterpart John Major who prepared the ground for it. Escorted by the Defence Forces, he was taken on his final journey, and Ireland's Prime Minister gave the graveside oration.
John loved Ireland, and it was a real love, not defined by a dislike or a fear of others, but a genuine love for our country and what we could be. It was a noble, true and modern patriotism.
Full military honours for a visionary, statesman and peacemaker. Who never lost touch with his roots. David Blevins, Sky News.
A look now at some of tonight's other top stories, and the British Medical Association says junior doctors are prepared to call off a 5-day strike later this month if the NHS allows more time for negotiations. Thousands of doctors are due to walk out for the 10th time, all part of an ongoing pay dispute. Following days of severe weather, the Met Office has issued 2 new yellow weather warnings for the UK. They are both for rain, affecting the southwest and east of the country, and are in place until tomorrow morning. Now, he's been given the name Fluffy, but he has an armour-like shell and a jaw strong enough to bite through bones. The alligator snapping turtle is normally found in the swamps of Florida, but a parish councillor was surprised to discover Fluffy in a lake in Cumbria. Took him to the local vet for identification, as Fraser Maud reports.
With a name as far from the truth as he is from his natural home, meet Fluffy, an alligator snapping turtle, usually found in the swamps of North America.
What they'll do is they'll sit in the shallows at the bottom of the water, they keep their mouth open, and there's a little small red part in there, and it kind of looks like a worm in the water, so it will attract fish and other small animals, and then it will grab them and eat them.
It was something of an unexpected treat for vet Don Mule when this little living dinosaur, with armour strong enough to withstand an alligator attack and jaws strong enough to bite through bone, was found here in Urswick Tarn in Cumbria.
So I do have a bit of a passion for reptiles and exotics. Well, our vets is called Wildside for a reason. We see pretty much everything, but this is the first snapping turtle that I have seen, but I was very excited when I got the news that it was going to be a snapping turtle coming in for sure.
Luckily, the person who found Fluffy used to live in Florida and knew exactly what it was and how dangerous it could be.
Some people thought it would have been a terrapin or just assumed and said just put it back. When I heard, we all said at Wildside, bring it in. So she brought it in and lo and behold, it is an alligator snapping turtle.
Turtles like Fluffy, who's still only 4 or 5 years old, can grow to over 12 stone in weight and live for 70 years in captivity. So there'll hopefully be a long life ahead for him when he reaches his new home at a sanctuary in Cornwall. Fraser Maud, Sky News.
Yeah, that vet handling Fluffy very carefully. Time now for the sport. Here's David.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
"2023 saw Rebecca Welsh become the first female Premier League referee and Sam Allison become the second ever black referee in the league. They both came from PGMOL's referee development group, dedicated to pushing talented officials into reaching the highest level of the game. The next crop of referees are hoping to break through to the big time, including former Stevenage player Farai Halam.
It's amazing to see Sam and Rebecca to go and do something which hasn't been done for a while, or in Bex's case has never been done before. I grew up on a council estate in East London. I didn't know anyone that refereed. I played 4 years full-time football, kind of leaving school, which was like my childhood dream. Came to an end, as all kind of careers do at some point. I kind of stumbled into refereeing. Didn't think it would lead to anything, and yeah, 8 years on, to be officiating the professional game, to be a PGMOL official is just like mind-blowing. It's fantastic. It's given me like a new lease of life. Historically, there's maybe been a bit of a stigma around refereeing of, oh, I'm not sure it's for me, I wouldn't do that. I think we're seeing refereeing changing, like massively for the better. People forget that referees are football fans themselves. Like, we all love the game. As you said, the amount of time we commit is beyond what people probably on the outside ever understand.
Emily Heaslip refereed last year's Women's FA Cup final and credits the group with her success so far.
It's very unified, if you like, and we're all together, we're all on the same journey, and it doesn't matter what background you're from, you know, what sex you are, to be involved within football. It's talent related, and as we know, the women's game is growing very, very fast. Naturally, some scrutiny will follow, and it's a very opinionated sport, and everyone's got views and opinions on lots of decisions that officials take. But I think camps like we've got, the content that we've got involved, will only ever support and help develop officials, and the better the officiating comes, the less, in theory, scrutiny that we get.
This is kind of the training ground, let's say, for us in terms of being able to get stuck into the technical side of what we do and discussing match incidents together and being quite open and honest in those conversations, but also that support staff that's around us. We've got psychologists, we've got physiologists. These days are really kind of where we learn our trade, so that come 3 o'clock on a Saturday we can go out there and go and deliver. We've got the laws of the game that we have to apply, work within, but within that it gives us that little bit of flexibility to use our personality at times in the right moments to manage an individual or a situation, again with the idea of having a positive impact on it.
Referees in the group have the chance to be mentored by Premier League officials like Anthony Taylor, and there's an emphasis on deeper football knowledge, delivered by Football Insights coach Irfan Kari.
My role as Football Insights coach is to help coach and mentor our match officials to develop a deeper understanding of the game. If we can understand how a team plays, how a team sets up its shape, what it does in possession, out possession, transition, does the team press high up the pitch, does it play out from the back, developing through the thirds, does the game that the referee is going to referee, is it going to be a toe-to-toe game, or is it going to be a game where one team dominates the ball and the other team sits in a mid or low block? If we can get our officials to understand that going into the game, it's going to help with their positioning and movement.
The ride to becoming a Premier League referee is a tough one, with guaranteed sacrifice. Which of the next batch will push themselves to the top? Chris Reedy, Sky Sports.
For me, it was just like, it was pure adrenaline, pure passion for that last 200. It was the morning off. My parents and my fiance came to my hotel and they were like asking how I was feeling. I was telling them, I'm going to win today. And so my dad doubled down and he goes, all right, so when you win, we're going to be standing over here. So you come over and you give us a hug then. And I was like, okay, perfect.
I can't see that well far away. So I was going, it's Josh in the lead, as we were jumping up and down. And it was just surreal.
We knew he was in a really good nick. Moving up to 600 to go, he got in the place he wanted to be, and then that's when it started getting really exciting. So, and then, as I say, the last 200 metres, everyone was just jumping up and down, and yeah, it was awesome. It was a very.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we're going to take a first look at Sunday's papers. It's the press preview. And tonight, joining me in the studio, writer and broadcaster Amy Nicol-Turner and former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. Great to see you both. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of tomorrow's Observer, the headline, "We've given up the fight, say Tories, as poll defeats loom." Don't go away, we'll be back in a minute.
had to make a 1-minute video about ourselves and our passion for sports and our support for Team GB.
And what is your sport? Do you have a sport?
Well, I like many sports, especially badminton, swimming and football.
Have a look at your video, that one you played as a mascot, because 20,000 people and you were one of those that got selected. That's incredible. Let's have a quick look.
Hello Team GB, my name is Alice and I'm 8 this year. Here are a few reasons why I'd be the perfect mini mascot for the team. I have a deep passion for sports and especially badminton. I love the feeling of competing and the joy of teamwork. Being a mini mascot would let me share that passion with everyone.
Yeah, we're over the moon. Yeah, when we learned about she got selected as a mini mascot, and yeah, we're very proud of her.
And tell me about your kit, because you're wearing your mini mascot kit today. It's all very smart.
Yeah, we collected it from where we needed to do our photo shoot.
So you've done a photo shoot?
Yeah.
And how was that?
It was really exciting.
So you met all the mini mascots, there they are, and yeah, there you are on the end. Did you find it a little bit embarrassing? I always find photo shoots a little bit embarrassing.
Well,
were you cool with it all?
Well, I was really nervous at the start, but when I got into it, I felt like it was really nice.
Now, you told me a secret in the break that you've known about this for a long time and it was supposed to be a secret. Yeah. So you've known since November. Could you keep it a secret?
Well, I could keep some of it a secret.
You told me that you couldn't keep it a secret. You'd be rubbish on Bake Off.
Hello again, welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, we've got the press preview for you. A first look at what is on the front of tomorrow's papers. But first, our top stories tonight. And King Charles has thanked the public for the support and goodwill he's received since his cancer diagnosis. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, has called for an immediate pause in the fighting in Gaza ahead of Israel's expected military offensive in Rafah. And Sky News has revealed how parents are turning to unregulated education because schools won't take their children. A very good evening. As always, it's time for the press preview. It's a first look at what is on Sunday's front pages. And tonight we'll be checking out the headlines with Amy Nicol-Turner and Anita Boateng. Very good evening to you both. We will take a look at the front pages, first of all, for you, though, starting with The Observer. We've given up the fight. The Observer quotes Tories as poll defeats loom. The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, warns that democracy is in danger if the young can't get houses. That's the front of the Sunday Times. Let's bring in the Telegraph. It covers Defence Secretary Grant Shapps' order to review the diversity and inclusivity policy at the Ministry of Defence. The Mail has an exclusive story on Buckingham Palace's reaction to the sale of fake books about the King's cancer diagnoses, while the Mirror covers the King's message of gratitude for the outpouring of public support. And the Daily Star reports on model Abby Clancy's close call with 3 UFOs while driving on the A3. Can you imagine? And don't forget, just scan that QR code you see on screen during the programme. You can have a look at the front pages of all of tomorrow's papers while you watch us discussing them. And to do that, Amy and Anita, great to see you both. Very good evening. Let's start then with this message from the King. We just heard about it at 10 o'clock this evening. The front of the Sunday Telegraph, Anita. King takes great comfort from support of the nation.
Yes, so we've got a statement from the King, kind of his first since the announcement of the palace that he was undergoing treatment for cancer. We don't know the nature of the cancer that he has, but he sent this kind of wonderful message speaking of his heartfelt thanks for the outpouring of support that he's received. And it kind of goes through some of the key things that he said, which is obviously his most helpful thanks. And he talks particularly about those who've been affected by cancer and talks about how these kind of kind thoughts mean a lot. So it feels like he's really connecting with not just the fact that he's going through cancer, but the millions of people in this country and their loved ones who have experienced this. And I think that one interesting element of this story is that the NHS has reported a significant increase in people looking up the symptoms of cancer. So raising awareness, getting people to get checked out, particularly men who tend to go to the GP less on these issues. Actually, this could be a really important moment for the conversation about how we deal with cancer in the UK.
Yeah, really interesting. As a man of a certain age, you know, people have been having conversations with me, friends and colleagues, and I think it has started a debate.
Oh, definitely. And one of the quotes is King Charles has said, it's heartening to hear how my diagnosis has helped promote understanding. However, it's one thing being diagnosed or going to the doctor, but unfortunately, the way things are at the moment, I think this also needs to start a conversation about the woeful cancer care that the UK is offering. We currently have the waiting list, which are the longest on record. That is a shocking statistic. So while, of course, we all wish King Charles a speedy recovery and our thoughts are, of course, with him, I think they're also with the 1 in 2 people who will be diagnosed with cancer and are currently looking at a 12-week wait before their first appointment even. There's also been news today of an increase in people opting for private cancer care as a last resort because they just can't they can't depend on the NHS. And of course, the King isn't depending on the NHS. I don't necessarily think he should, but I think it starts a conversation about why is it the case that an ordinary person wouldn't have the same care as has been on offer to King Charles.
Yeah, I think the frustration is that actually when you get to receive the care, it can be very good, can't it? It's just the problem of getting it and those waiting lists.
Yes, and I think this is something that, you know, when you think about the NHS strikes, when you think about, you know, whether it's the junior doctors, consultants, all of the disruption that's happened as a result of COVID, all the ways in which, you know, the infrastructure of the NHS has really been tested over the past couple of years. It's hard to be completely optimistic about how the country is going to get to a situation where, you know, the kind of Rolls-Royce treatment that you can receive on the NHS is delivered as standard. And I think that's one of the challenges that really doesn't really go away, even when you fix some of the challenges around funding. So this is much more fundamental than that, particularly as we get into an ageing population where we do see, sadly, more occurrences of cancers.
Yeah. OK, well, let's stay with the King's health because the Mail on Sunday has a shocking story on its front. The Palace calls in lawyers over bogus AI books on the King's cancer. Amy, a number of books have been found for sale online that have come out in the last few days, clearly not written by legitimate authors, but by AI and on sale.
Yeah, so this is quite fascinating, really. So there's a rise in Amazon self-publishing feature when it comes to books, and there's no real way of telling whether it is written by AI or written by an actual author. And I think the problem here is people are so interested in finding out exactly the type of cancer that King Charles has. It brings up that question, doesn't it? Is it of public interest or is it just interesting to the public? AI has obviously decided that it will be profitable to try and put this out there, and people are searching for it. So it's getting a lot of airtime. But I think it's kind of ironic to me that the Mail would run this story when they've had a live ticker on their website of every single utterance, detail, tiny little fart about King Charles's diagnosis since it started. Because, well, yeah, there is a lot of intrigue into this story, and they're not helping that.
I suppose the point is that people are making money out of the King's illness and doing it in a pretty distasteful way.
Yes, I think so. And actually, this has been a real problem for a lot of authors for quite a while, since there were some stories about it last year, with several authors finding out that actually money had been made through these books with their names on them, you know, published authors with these weird, odd AI stories purporting to be biographies, all sorts of things. And it really is going to continue to be a problem. And, you know, Amazon obviously wants to encourage self-publishing. You want authors to be able to kind of make their mark in a way that they know how, even without a publishing deal. But fundamentally, this does serve to continue to undermine trust in information that we receive, which is ultimately very, very damaging to almost, honestly, the fabric of society. Coming into an election year where we're going to see more and more potential AI-generated fake news or broader fake news, I think it really does skew the public discourse in a way that's quite troubling.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And talking of elections, let's move on to the front of the Observer. We've given up the fight, Amy, say the Tories, as poll defeat looms. Fill us in on this.
Right, so the Observer headline reckons that Conservative MPs have admitted defeat and they're already speaking about another change of leadership, potentially. And it's quoted that the Tory party is in a death spiral. Now, for me, I think the Tory party are in a situation of reputation preservation right now. And I think stories like this just highlight what has become of them, which is a bit looking like rats in a sack. Because talking about a change of leadership at the moment, for me, highlights how inward they look. They look at their party rather than the actual implications of their policy and where they could go with that. Their leader isn't the problem, and he hasn't been the problem for the last however long. It's the party. The party is the problem. And I think it's that age-old thing, is your life better now than it was under Labour in 2010? And I don't think many people, apart from maybe the mega-rich, can look around and say, yes, my life is better now.
Anita, by-elections this week as well.
Yes.
Coming up.
In Wellingborough and Kingswood. And so it's interesting that, that, Amy, you talk about leadership, because actually there isn't a single thing about leadership in this story. It talks about this prediction that there's going to be fresh attacks on Sunak's leadership, and I can't even see any quotes about that. It's mostly about the fact that, like, these two by-elections are going to be really challenging, and it says, for instance, that the Sunak allies have said that they've timed this in recess to reduce the kind of parliamentary chatter and unnerve. I think fundamentally there's no denying the challenge that the Conservative Party as a whole faces, but it sort of feels more like here, you know, journalists in hunt of a story rather than anything new here that suggests there is going to be any fresh challenges to his leadership,
well, you're
for
right,
instance.
but it says anti-Sunak chatter and plotting in quotes, and we do know that Kemi Badenoch had a group called Evil Plotters, so it's not out the question that there is some truth to this story, because every time something goes wrong, particularly certain factions of the Conservative Party seem to say, it's nothing to do with us, we just need a new leader.
Sorry, there's one person that's publicly said that, one MP. So I don't buy that. And I also think that people have funny WhatsApp group titles all the time. And I think we're slightly, as Westminster, guilty of reading into this what we want to happen, because it will be very sensationalist rather than reflecting the reality of what's happening.
OK, listen, we've just got 1 minute, so let's squeeze one more story in. It's on the front of the Telegraph again. Migrants dupe church leaders to avoid deportation, say judges. Amy, Abdul Ezedi isn't mentioned certainly in the article on the front page, but of course we hear that he converted to Christianity in order to win his appeal to stay in the UK. Is this related to that?
Yeah, and last week we also saw the 7 migrants on the Billy Stockholm barge suddenly saying they wanted to be baptised, and some people believe that that has led to bolstering their asylum claims. The headline here is migrants dupe church leaders to avoid deportation. However, the ultimate decision with any deportation or any asylum claim falls to the Home Office. So I can't see how it's the church's job to interrogate asylum seekers. I think it's the church's job to be there to support vulnerable people and provide whatever they can in that regard. And then it's up to the Home Office to interrogate what the church has, what they've gone through with the church. So I think this is potentially what I've seen a lot of, is trying to pass the buck on these asylum decisions to a third party rather than where the responsibility lies, which is within the Home Office.
OK, we're out of time. We will chat again in a couple of minutes after this short break. Don't go away.
Oh, God.
Independent, United Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News. Hello again, welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Amy and Anita are still with me in the studio. Anita, let's turn our attention to the front of the Observer once again. We've been running a story all day today about parents turning to unregulated education because children with special educational needs are simply being turned away from schools. And this article's quite interesting, isn't it? Schools across England warning they'll soon be unsafe because they're having to cut teachers and support staff to save money, and record numbers of them are now in debt.
threat.
Yes, I think it's another dimension to the story that you've been running all day, which is, fascinating about the ways in which, teaching and pupils are really kind of suffering again, kind of post-COVID in particular, where absenteeism, for instance, kind of rose enormously, mental health challenges amongst 9 to 12-year-olds, almost trebled. Like, there's some really dramatic statistics when you look at this. So the Observer focuses particularly on a warning that schools might be unsafe because they have to cut the number of teachers and, crucially, support staff. So it references the fact that a lot of 1 in 8 local council authorities were in deficit in 2022-2023, which is the highest on record since schools took charge of their own funding in 1999. And that's when schools are starting to get increasingly anxious. And really what's fascinating about this story is that education, as much as it's one thing that if you talk to the public, that's what first comes to mind when you think about what government does, education really hasn't been at the forefront of conversation as much as you might expect, given the levels of challenges that are being faced in schools right now.
Yeah, how do we fix this, Amy?
Well, there's been massive recruitment and retention problems in schools for years now. I think we fix this by looking after teachers and acknowledging that they're one of the most important jobs in society, a bit like they do in, say, somewhere like Finland, where you have to have a master's degree. You're one of the most respected jobs in society. You're paid really well. We don't have that respect for teachers, and I think that's got worse since COVID, particularly the parent-teacher relationship. I think a lot of parents now, they think, well, I can do that at home because I did during COVID. So we need to raise the morale and actually respect our teachers. I think that could start with a bit of a pay rise. But the National Education Union, they've said these numbers are only going to get worse. So it's a really scary time for schools. Like Anita said, with the record absences from kids, which obviously won't be helped. Their teachers are chopping and changing. There was a mention in this piece about the support staff being cut, and teachers need that. They need that in schools. So I think, the kids have been through so much. That 2.5 years of COVID affected children so much. I have a 9-year-old son. His reading was really impacted. 2 years is a long time in a kid's life. So this is sad to see.
Yeah,
and I hope
still facing the
particularly
consequences
when the
of
schools
that.
are crumbling like aero bars at the same time.
Yeah. A lot to deal with. You can read more about that in The Observer. In the front of the Sunday Times, from education to housing, Anita, Michael Gove is writing in the Times, warning that democracy is in danger if the young can't get on the housing ladder.
Yes, and Michael Gove is expected to be out on the airwaves tomorrow talking about an announcement around housing, perhaps. So this is presumably an interview that ties into that. So there's something really profound in this, actually. He talks about the fact that if young people feel like markets are rigged, then you get an increasing number of young people saying, I don't believe in democracy, I don't believe in markets. And this is in reference to a study that came out in September of last year, if I'm not incorrect. There was a global poll that showed that actually, like 18 to 35-year-olds are much more likely to sort of support military rule and authoritarianism. There's an interesting strain. It's not just happening in the UK, it's happening in the US too. But this question around what is a promise of democracy? What is a promise of opportunity? When we see the fact that 18 to 35-year-olds, the most common living arrangement now is living with parents, you start to see how some of that generational breakdown starts to really manifest and present itself in really unpredictable ways, not just in the kinds of things you might expect, like the fact that you have fewer people having children, for instance, at younger ages, but also their belief in democracy for delivering the kinds of opportunities they want. So this is a really important story, and it kind of runs through some of the options that are being explored by the government to really mark a shift in the kinds of access to housing that young people might be able to have in the future. And the Tories are worried
about the under-40s, aren't they? About young people, that they're losing them all.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a bit more like that old arsonist coming to put out the fire type situation, because, I mean, Michael Gove here, he sort of blames NIMBYs, but is it not just a severe lack of house building, selling off the housing supply, the housing stock, and not replenishing it? Is it not more simple? Is it not to do with that? I don't know. I think that fundamentally we didn't build enough, this government didn't build enough houses. And have missed their targets consistently, which means there's a lack of supply doesn't meet the demand.
Listen, it's a fair point. We're out of time. We will speak again in half an hour. Thank you both very much for now. We're going to take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days look mild but unsettled, with widespread showers and more prolonged rain in places. There'll be quite a chilly start tomorrow, especially in the north, with fog and frost in places, rain near many North Sea coasts and a scattering of showers in the south and west. The rain in the east will become largely confined to eastern Scotland during the morning, leaving most central and eastern parts fine. There'll be just a few showers for southeast England. Western parts, meanwhile, will see further showers. It'll be mild for most, although breezier than today. But a stiff wind over the far southwest will ease, and showers will develop more widely during the afternoon, while rain in the northeast will become confined to the Northern Isles. And Monday will be quite windy, with blustery showers spreading from the west. The showers will be concentrated over northwestern parts, where they'll be wintry on the hills.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up next on Sky News at 11, King Charles thanks the public for the support and goodwill he's received since his cancer diagnosis.